RS 30086 is before the committee. Representative Mathias, introduce yourself, where you're from, and tell us what you have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. For the record, my name is Representative Mathias. I represent this great District 19 that we are currently in, and I apologize for this extremely embarrassing moment, but the chairman obligated me to share this embarrassing news. Yesterday, in the middle of the night, a freak incident happened with my legislative computer, and it was absolutely wiped out. IT spent all day with it yesterday. Nothing was recoverable. So all of the things that I wanted to share with you, I now have to share from memory, essentially. And my wife is out of town, so after I got the kids to bed last night, I stayed up and I tried to recall as much as I could from my mind. So I brought some of my hard documents, so I'm going to do my best to answer your questions, but I'm just going to speak from the heart and kind of just what's happened over the last year. When the chairman asked me last week, he said, "Hey, is your bill ready for prime time?" I said, "My bill is ready for prime time, but I'm not ready for prime time." I had actually wanted to speak to each of you individually and walk through what it is that I'm trying to do and kind of what the evidentiary basis is for doing that. And I didn't get a chance to do that, so for that I apologize. When I gave Representative Young her copy, she saw what I handed her and she looked at me, she said, "Geez, you are persistent." And the answer is I am indeed persistent. I mean, that's my job around here. That's what I'm expected to do, is to be persistent. But the reason that I'm persistent on this particular bill is because it's absolutely the right thing to do, just like it was in 1998, 1994, 1983, 1965. And I think there's some really serious repercussions for our criminal justice system in our state if we don't do this. So what I am trying to do here with this bill is to make a modification to our statute that covers the grading of theft. The grading of theft is where the legislature distinguishes between regular theft and then those thefts that are serious. If you steal someone's firearm, regardless of its value, whether it works or not, it's serious. If you steal someone's debit card, even if there's only $11 in their checking account, it's serious. If you use extortion to take something from someone, it is serious. None of these have to be adjusted for inflation. But the dollar threshold does, because if you don't adjust it for inflation, then we don't take the opportunity to define what is serious. And in 1998, we said stealing $1,000 is serious. So last year when I was here, we had what I think is one of the best conversations I've ever had in a legislative committee here. I think we were here for almost 2 hours. And because I don't have my notes from that meeting, what I seem to recall, and correct me if I'm wrong for those of you that were here, I think the consensus of the group is that it's hard to conclude that $1,000 is still fair and current, which is the standard we adopted ourselves in 1993 in House Concurrent Resolution 16. In 1993, we had an interim committee focused just on the criminal code, and one of the things they came back and said is we need to make sure that we adjust our financial penalties for inflation and that we keep our laws current and fair and current. So that's kind of the marker and the threshold that I follow. So the committee seemed to agree that, Chris, $1,000, yeah, maybe it's not fair, but there was absolutely no agreement on what we should raise it to. Last year, I proposed that we raise it to $2,500 because that's what Texas does, and that was the best reason I could come up with. They're a conservative state, so we should do what they do. And this group said, that's extremely poor reasoning, Representative Mathias. I vote no, and it died a noble death in committee. So here I am again with a much humbler request. What this bill would do is make a partial inflationary adjustment to the dollar threshold. And I say partial because, especially what we know has happened with inflation in the last 16 months or so, a full inflationary adjustment would raise the dollar threshold closer to $2,000, but this would just raise it to $1,800. In addition to keeping this fair and current, the increase in, and I'll call it the 1B1 provision, I mentioned some of the indicators of how we define seriousness. This is the first one, the value of what you've stolen. In the last 3 years, because we haven't adjusted this for inflation, the number of grand theft charges filed has continued to skyrocket. So felony records are being imposed on Idahoans at increasing rates. For example, in 2020, charges were filed 63 times under this provision in Idaho, and the next year it jumped up 37% to 83. And then the next year it jumped up 76%, and last year it was filed 146 times. And the reason it's charged so many times is because everything's worth $1,000 today. Now, I don't think that any of us want to be perceived to be soft on crime. I think we can all agree on that. I certainly don't. But this section of the code is not about how much are retail thieves stealing, or how much is a catalytic converter worth today versus yesterday, or how much is someone's construction tools worth to them. The whole purpose of this statute is for us to say this is serious. This is serious. And I think it's a reasonable step for us to take to raise the dollar threshold to $1,800 to adjust for partially adjust for inflation. It's been 25 years, and I think this is a smart thing to do. Let me just add one other piece, because I had this conversation this morning, and so I suspect some of you will be approached by stakeholders with this. One very common tactic by organized retail thieves is to come into our local communities and to steal as much as you can as quickly as you can, and then get out. Either take it to another jurisdiction and sell it, or sell it online. This is a very common practice. Now, some people argue that when they come into a Target, for example, and they steal 11 $100 gift certificates, that those thieves stop, add up the value, overlay it with our criminal code, and say, oops, I'm about to cross the dollar threshold, and put one back. That's what we are told. So let's suppose for a minute that that's true. In 1994, this body made a really good decision. In deference to our law enforcement community, in deference to the suggestion that that might be true, we added subsection 1B8. And I want to draw your attention to 1B8. 1B8 says that if you do that, organized retail thieves, if you go to a bunch of different stores and you steal 900 from that store and 700 from that store, and you keep stealing with the intent to stay below the dollar threshold, our prosecutors can bundle all that up and add it all up, add all the dollar values together, and you just cross the threshold. So that's not something I think we should be worrying about. So with that, I would ask that you please print this so that we can have a full hearing, and a really good hearing. And two things will happen at that hearing. I'll have the opportunity to lay out in much more detail, share some research, answer all of your questions, which I love to do. But also you'll be able to hear why the primary agents of law enforcement are opposed, and why they were opposed in 1998, 1994, 1965. And they have legitimate concerns that should be heard. So with that, whether you want to do this or not, I would please ask that you at least print this so that we can have a really great hearing. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer anyone's questions.
Representative Mathias, well done. Without your notes, I would not want to be in your shoes if I lost all my notes. So, Representative Young.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we print RS 30086.
No more red lights? Okay, I can miss them sometimes. So the motion is properly before the committee to introduce. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.